everyone. I want to make sure that we get started on time. So thank you for coming on to this session on language and culture considerations. It is a panel, and although on the schedule, on the program, it said that we have 4 panelists, one was unable to attend. So I am going to introduce our 3 panelists for today who come from a diverse background. So we'll be able to engage in language and culture from different perspectives. My name is Jane Kim. I am an advisor and field supervisor at UCLA, and I'll be moderating this session, this 45-minute session. The Olivia Obeso is from UCLA. She is a dual language teacher, field supervisor. If you can raise your hand so that everybody can see you or say hello. Thank you. The next person I'd like to introduce is Terry. She is from UC Irvine, and she teaches in the undergraduate teacher education program and specializes in culturally responsive mathematics. Can you wave your hand and say hello? And then we have Diane Lang. There's Diane, who will speak on academic discourse in dual language math and science, and discuss target language versus native language and centering language in the classroom. And she's a principal of a dual language school in addition to being a supervisor. Can you say hello as well so everyone can see you, Diane? There you go. So I know we have a few people coming on, but because we have 3 speakers, I want to make sure that they have time to talk and you have an opportunity to share your questions and have a discussion. So while they are presenting, please put questions in the chat, which we will then address in the last 15 minutes of the discussion time, this session. So we're going to set aside 15 minutes for all of us to engage in the questions and to share in some of the experiences you have with language and culture and supervision in the classrooms. Let me go ahead and share the slide for today. And again, I want to apologize, but the 4th panelist was unable to join, but we have 3 speakers for today. And we're going to start with Terry, who I think that is your actually full name, right?
Therese is my formal name, yes, the name at birth, yes. So, yeah.
So Terry, would you like to begin your 6-minute talk on your culturally responsive classroom?
Thank you. So I'm at, as Jane said, I'm at UC Irvine in the CalTeach program, the undergraduate teacher preparation program that we have at UCI, where the students are getting their degrees and their teaching credentials while they're undergraduates. And when they graduate, they have a degree in math or science and a teaching credential. I'm an instructor and a supervisor in that program, and I've been a supervisor since 2011 in the program. So what I wanted to talk about today was how student teachers could look intentionally at their lessons in a culturally relevant framework. So next slide, please. So the framework that I'm going to be using comes from a graduate student in our program a number of years ago, Catherine Ye, who teaches now at Chapman. And she got this document from the Teachers Empowered to Advance Change in Mathematics, Teach Math. And she shared this with me as I was teaching a class for our candidates in the fall of 2014. Next slide. I posted the rubric and the tool in our resources, but unfortunately, they come in sideways. So what my presentation will be about is to summarize the information that's in this tool. I was really excited in the last presentation that Darlene Lee was, in one of her slides, said that we should promote intentional self-reflection by candidates, and that's what this lesson analysis tool does. It helps candidates to look at different aspects of cultural responsiveness in their classrooms and reflect on how well they were able to incorporate those categories into their lesson. And it's not an evaluation tool, it's a self-reflection tool, but it can be used by both the candidate and the supervisor as talking points so that there's something very concrete and substantial that can be discussed rather than something that's vague and amorphous. Next slide, please. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, 6 categories that are generally accepted as part of culturally responsive teaching are these 6. What's the cognitive demand? What are the students being asked to do? What's the depth of knowledge? What's the discourse that the students are being engaged in? What's the power and participation and the academic support of English learners, as well as the cultural and community-based funds of knowledge? Generally, our student candidates are very good about trying to incorporate the top 3, the cognitive demand, the depth of knowledge, and the discourse. They're not as proficient in thinking about power and participation, academic support for English learners, and cultural and community-based funds of knowledge. So this group, the Teach Math group, suggests to spend more time in conversations about categories 4 through 6, and not so much with the first 3. And it's not, these 6 are not meant to be included in every single lesson, but are meant to be spread across several lessons so that over time, the student teacher incorporates all of these aspects in lessons. Next slide, please. So each of the 6 categories on this tool has a guiding question. And the guiding question for the cognitive demand is, how does the lesson enable students to closely explore and analyze concepts, procedures, and reasoning strategies? Now, this tool is meant for math, but I've also used it with science student teachers, and it transfers very easily to other disciplines. And while I'm presenting these questions, I'd like you to be thinking about how you could adapt these questions to your own conversations with your own student teachers. Next slide, please. Because you can't see the tool, I'm highlighting some of the aspects of the rubric so that you can see what the tool contains. So under cognitive demand, for instance, because it's math, Leaping Ma talks about 4 ways that cognition can be included in lessons: facts, procedures with connections or real world connections, and then doing math, so that the students are doing the work of mathematicians and doing more deep understanding and conversation and interaction with the concepts. Next slide, please. So then the next category, depth of knowledge and student understanding. How does the lesson make student thinking and understanding visible and deep? This goes across all discipline areas. Next slide, please. So then here's how the tool addresses this. How does the teacher address concepts? Is it very superficially and very trivially, with more attention paid to algorithms rather than to concepts? Or is the understanding sufficient enough so that the students can use their understanding of the concepts to have conversations and to come with reasoned and supported conclusions? Next slide, please. The next category is mathematical discourse. And how does the lesson create opportunities to discuss mathematics in meaningful and rigorous ways? Notice the language functions here, debating, using terminology, developing explanations, communicating reasoning, and making generalizations. So here the students are being invited to participate in conversations with each other. Next slide, please. And
Terry, you have 30 seconds left.
Okay. So then the tool talks about what groups there are. Next slide, please. The question for power and participation: who has the authority of the knowledge? Is it the teacher or the students? Next slide, please. How does the teacher address status differences in small groups? Next slide, please. How does the lesson provide academic support? Next slide, please. And in the rubric, there are some very intentional, concrete references for how language is supported in the lesson. And that the focus is on developing discourse and not looking at correct English usage. Next slide, please. Then community-based funds of knowledge, there are two. One is how do the students apply the math or knowledge to their own authentic situations in their lives. Next slide, please. And then here's what the tool looks like. And then finally, next slide, does the lesson support changing of equity and social justice issues in their lives? And so then the tool uses the next slide, please. So looking at issues and being proactive in using math and finding math applications to these issues in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And later on, we'll be able to come back to this slide for the questions to consider. And to build on what Terry spoke about the 6 different domains for culturally responsive teaching in supporting language and culture, Olivia is going to share on the work she does with pre-service teachers or student teachers in the Spanish-English dual language programs.
Thank you. So my name is Olivia Obeso. I'm a field supervisor at UCLA's TEP, and I'm going to be talking about my experience supporting elementary teachers teaching full-time in Spanish-English dual language programs. Next slide. So just a brief background, I have worked as a language teacher, a teacher trainer, and a curriculum developer, and I'm going into my 2nd year as a supervisor in UCLA's TEP. I'm also a PhD student in urban schooling, and my research is focused on language and multilingualism in K-12 settings. The teachers that I work with are all first-year full-time teachers and master's students. I know each TEP is set up a little bit differently, so I think that's an important distinction. And then they're all bilingual in English and Spanish. They all work in elementary dual language classrooms. Some work in self-contained classrooms where they teach both English and Spanish. And then others work in a rotating model where they teach Spanish all day and have 2 groups of students that they share with an English-only teacher. And then some of the programs that they're working in are really new and expanding at the schools, and then others have been very established for years. Next slide. So despite all these differences in their settings, these teachers all struggled with some common things. And I saw as the biggest barrier for all of them was the devaluing of Spanish in their programs, which often meant that their classrooms got a lot less respect in a lot of different ways. So this devaluing was reflected in the resources and support that they were given by their schools. They would tell me often that there would be a bunch of resources that would be passed around the grade level, and then someone would say, oh, that's right, you're Spanish only, we don't have anything for you. Or, oh yeah, you do math in Spanish, we don't have anything for that. And so it put a lot more work on them. The devaluing of Spanish was also reflected in the assessments that teachers were required to give. So in LAUSD and elementary, they have what's called the DIBELS, which is the English literacy assessment, and then the IDEL is the Spanish literacy assessment. And the IDEL is significantly less built out than DIBELS, and it doesn't actually record data that's really usable in any way for the teachers or actually meaningful. But they're still required to do it, I think, once every 2 to 3 weeks for each student. So that significantly eats into really valuable instruction and learning time. And then finally, often in these dual language programs, the teachers are asked to adhere to really rigid language blocks, where they're told, you know, have your Spanish time and have your English time. And then they're told to police their students' language within those specific times of instruction, even though that's not really how communication flows in truly bilingual spaces. This stresses out the teacher a lot and their students. The intention of this is really good. Its intention is to rebalance the English-Spanish power differential by forcing a portion of learning to take place in Spanish. But because Spanish is devalued on all these other ways, this kind of rigid policing really fails to address the imbalance. And more importantly, it really gets in the way of teachers forming real bonds with their students. Last slide. So I was trying to decide what would be most helpful to share with you all today based on my experience. And I think it's important to think about what is most helpful for us to do as supervisors or supporters of teachers or student teachers in dual language programs, given the common struggle of Spanish being devalued. These things are things that my teachers told me were especially helpful to them this past year. And I think that these are also in some ways applicable to teachers who are in English-only classrooms that are linguistically diverse. So first, I think most importantly, we have to really center Spanish or whatever the target language is that they teach in and our support for them. So this means helping them find high quality resources and balancing out the lack of target language support that many of them experience at their schools. This means visiting them during Spanish times to give them support that their monolingual colleagues cannot. I also always made sure when I went in to visit these classrooms, I always interacted with their students in Spanish, even if I entered during an English-only time, as an effort to kind of demonstrate its value in the classroom space and help influence their students' perception of Spanish. A student in one class told me that I was the only person, besides their teacher, of course, who ever came into the classroom and spoke to them in Spanish. So this kind of English only stuff really perpetuates that devaluing. And all my teachers told me that it was really helpful that they had someone who came in and was a Spanish speaker and kind of centered that language within the academic context. So second, I worked a lot with them to rethink how they can use the assessments that they're required to administer and how they can approach collecting data that's actually helpful to them. With one teacher, we generated a simple worksheet that she used alongside the IDEL assessment to document the information that she needed. The IDEL really only measures how fast students can read aloud and how long they can say anything in Spanish without pausing, so it's really unhelpful by itself. And helping her think through what she could use it for in a helpful way made her feel less like she was wasting time when she was doing this requirement. And then finally, I think that it's really important that connections are facilitated with other dual language teachers, whether they're graduates from the TEP program or currently working alongside each other in the program. And I think this is especially important if these teachers don't have bilingual field supervisors who can provide that kind of support. So we often in our seminars, we did breakout groups of grade level teams, but would put the dual language teachers together, even though they worked at different grade levels. And they always said that this time was super valuable and it gave them the opportunity to share resources they found or activities that had worked for them. Yeah, and so that's it.
Thank you, Olivia. Perfect timing. And so the next person that I would like to introduce is Diane. And you have 6 minutes to talk. Diane, are you muted? We can't hear you.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay.
So good morning. I'm Diane Lang. I am a field supervisor at UC Berkeley, and I am a principal at Manzanita Seed in Oakland. Manzanita Seed is a dual language immersion elementary school, TK through 5. Our students follow a 50-50 language allocation model in which they spend half their day in English and half their day in Spanish. So what I was going to talk about today is academic discourse, observations I did of in-service teachers related to academic discourse in the Spanish-English dual language immersion math and science block. Next slide. I wanted to correlate this to the information shared by Terry as far as the mathematical discourse. And one of the questions asking what you see on the slide related to how does my lesson create opportunities to discuss math in meaningful and rigorous ways, debate math ideas, solution strategies and math terminology, etc. Because the focus in these observations of teachers was on student talk time and calling on strategies, looking closely at what amount of time are students actually being able to speak, being encouraged to speak, and how are they being encouraged and invited to speak. Because what we recognized is that if students are sitting through classes and lessons and never getting an opportunity to speak, then we're not being equitable in their access to the content standard that we're striving to teach. We really don't know if they understand what's happening. We really don't know if students are engaged in the content of the lesson if the teacher is doing all the speaking. So that was the lens through which we were looking. The next slide. So some of the observations of classroom teachers included quantified observations of student and teacher talk time. So that means specifically going in with the rubric that kept track of how many times students were able to speak, including the equity lens of how many male students were called upon to speak, how many female students were called upon to speak, how many African American students were called upon to speak, how many Asian Pacific Islander, Latinx students were called upon to speak, and of course quantifying the numbers that were present in the classroom so that the feedback to the teacher would be relevant. So being able to inform the teacher, out of 20 students, 5 of them spoke in your classroom, and giving the teacher an opportunity to reflect on, in that whole lesson, only 5 of my students spoke. Yes, actually, this is what I saw. So being able to help the teacher be reflective. Making observations of teachers and students in their native language and their target language. So just to clarify, because the school is dual language immersion, all students are spending half their day in a target language, meaning our native English speakers are spending half their day in Spanish-speaking setting and classroom and making observations related to that. And our native Spanish-speaking students are spending half their day in an English-speaking classroom with their English teacher. I observed trends related to students speaking more, being called upon more in their target language. So that would be native English speakers being called upon more in the English classroom, and native Spanish speakers being called upon more in the Spanish block of math instruction. So these observations helped us and helped my teachers and I to be able to see that we were overly focused on calling on students during the part of the day in which we felt, or it would be believed, that they were more confident and able in their language. Also, I wanted to share, if you'll go back. That slide shouldn't be. Also wanted to share that there were trends identified related to students, not only speaking more in their target language, but an emphasis on correct answers. We recognized that we were heavily emphasizing on on this calling on the student in the language and calling on students during math with a heavy focus on answers being correct. And also relying upon raised hands as an indicator of who was ready to speak. So we wanted to look at ways to improve our practice around moving away from raised hands, whether that is utilizing equity sticks or whether it was just allowing students to call on their peers in order to prompt who would speak next. But we really wanted to be intentional on moving away from the teacher just relying on raised hands, because of course we want all students to speak, and so that was our goal. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let me look, because that's, so finally there was a rubric of what we used for calling on strategies, and what the calling on strategies included were making sure that we were clear on the fact that it's critical for students, for all students, to have talk time, and being intentional on calling on students. We also utilize the depth of knowledge questions, because it's not sufficient to just call on students. We wanted to use depth of knowledge questions in order to have depth in the speaking and what students were responding to. We also wanted to call in that wrong answers are an opportunity to promote critical thinking, and that when we can explain wrong answers and we can talk about critical thinking, that needs to be highlighted as an opportunity to discuss, in particular, math equations based on wrong answers, and allowing students to talk through. Another important takeaway is the use of the structure of the turn and talk, because that, especially as we think about students who are language learners, the structure of the turn and talk is critical, because it gives students an opportunity to prepare, to practice, to think about what they're going to say, especially if they are not speaking in their native language, before they're asked to share aloud with the class. And so on this slide, we're supposed to show you the rubric. I'm not sure where it went, but here we are. So I just wanted to take you through what I wanted you to see, which was the rubric related to the use of calling on strategies and the ways in which we strive to push ourselves beyond the comfort of calling on that person who has their hand up because we think they have the right answer, and then we can feel better about the lesson. And we wanted to actually engage in calling on any student at any time, but being mindful to give students that turn and talk structure to practice before they speak. And it's also useful and important to use the turn and talk structure so that all students in the classroom have had an opportunity to talk. Whether they are going to speak out loud to the class or not, we want all students to be speaking. And I will definitely share that rubric that was supposed to be here as soon as I pull it up.
I can stop. Thank you, Diane. And thank you to the three panelists for sharing their work they do with field supervision. I'm going to actually stop share and re-present, and then it should pop up. We're also going to put the slides into the Google Drive folder, which is located in the program after this session is over. We were working on this slide for quite all the way up to presentation time. So let me share again now, and at this point it should pop up. So it looks like we're at 10:43, and so if any of the panelists feel that they want to speak on anything for 1 minute or 30 seconds or so, please go ahead and pop in for 30 seconds to finalize anything that you mentioned, and then we'll ask the participants to share any questions or resources they have regarding this topic of language and culture considerations. So Terry, Olivia, and Diane, is there anything you'd like to mention that you didn't get a chance to mention before we go to Q&A?
I did want to add on to something that Diane brought forward about the number of students talking and in the classroom. Elizabeth Cohen, in her work on complex instruction reminds us that it's the students who are talking who are learning the most. And so it's really important for us to encourage all students to be talking. So I love Diane's idea of having students talking to each other first to generate ideas and compare their ideas to other people's ideas before having a whole group discussion in the classroom. So that's very supportive of English learners. It gives them time to rehearse and to hear other ideas. And the other thing is, I noticed that when we ask questions of students, if we give them opportunities to talk to each other first to develop their ideas and rehearse them, that it's helpful if we ask them, tell me what ideas did you hear? So that removes some of the risk for themselves that they're not having to promote an idea that may be laughed at or not valued in the classroom. If the teacher asks them what idea did they hear, then they're sharing an idea perhaps that their elbow partner or their seat partner shared, and then they're more willing to participate in those conversations, because if the idea isn't the correct idea, then it's not on them, because it was something that their partner had said. And so we find there's a lot more participation if the teacher asks, what did you hear?
Thank you, Terry. I'm gonna stop share screen so that everyone can participate in a discussion. I already received one question in the chat. Oh, several. So let me go ahead and ask the panelists the first question. Laura Gold asks, I very much like to hear the panelists' thoughts on discourse and equity during distance learning.
I'd like to respond to that. One of the things we're focusing on as a district, like I shared, I'm a principal in Oakland Unified, is that as we are now adjusting to teaching in the virtual space, we are intentional on seeking opportunities to create community and culture in a virtual setting. One of the things that we are doing is trying to break students up into small groups and using a structure where students will use perhaps maybe you have a slide up, and for your introduction, you're going to ask everyone to state something about themselves. They can add it to the slide so that everyone can see it, and then be prepared when it's their turn, if you will, however you go about giving everyone the opportunity to engage. When it's their turn, allowing them to share about themselves, and everyone has seen it projected on the slide. So it could be something as asking all of you, what is your field supervisor superpower? Then you're going to type it on the slide next to your name, and then we're all going to come around and we're all going to get that opportunity to speak. So we're trying to continue to be intentional around holding space for everyone to speak and everyone to engage, even in the virtual setting, because we know it's easier to perhaps turn off your screen or just disengage, especially if you feel like no one's going to call on me, so I don't really have to tune in.
Thanks, Diane. Is there other panelists who wants to engage in this question? The next question comes from Lily. But are there cultural differences among the students in terms of their comfort level in speaking up in class? Do we need to consider this?
I think this is really close to what Diane was talking about, but I also think that there are differences, of course, in their comfort level in speaking up. And I think that that's why giving them opportunities like turn and talk, or like discuss in small groups, or even maybe sharing through writing their thoughts, just giving them different formats for that talk time, even if it doesn't all look like speaking by themselves directly to the teacher kind of thing.
And something that my student teachers did during distance learning was they employed the chat a lot. So they would pose a question and then have the students interact on the chat. And what we found out was that, of course, the first students who jumped in posted an answer, and the student teacher thanked them for their response, but didn't value it or didn't say, oh, that's a great idea, just thanked them for writing, and then said, I'm looking for some more responses, and then encouraged other students to write in the chat. And it turned out that the students who were more reluctant, after several posts, started incorporating ideas that had already been written, or started adding little details of their own by adding to what was written. And so as Olivia just said, giving them, and I think Diane has said as well, giving them an opportunity to write in the chat, for instance, offers them a way to safely pose their ideas.
Thank you, Olivia and Terry. Maria responded, excellent idea that wrong answers create opportunities for critical thinking. Mr. Brooks asks the following: what is the opinion between using a random method for calling on students versus hands raised? We know a student with his hand raised knows the answer.
Well, this addresses equity in the classroom. If we are focusing on students with their hand raised, then that eliminates so many other students in the room from thinking and from participating. So as Diane pointed out, you know, oftentimes the number of students who are actively participating through language is 1/4 or 1/5 of the total population of students. So giving the students opportunities to share in a risk-free space with a partner allows them an opportunity to verbalize and practice language and practice ideas. And that way, everybody in the room is talking and thinking, which doesn't happen when you're just calling on students with their hands raised.
Yeah, to add to that, when you're calling on students with their hands raised, that is what we notice lent itself to giving feedback to a teacher that only 6 out of 20 or 6 out of 30 students were engaged, because it was the same students raising their hands. Also, again, the importance of that talk time before students, even before you ask anyone to speak out loud, giving students opportunity to speak to each other and creating the conditions in your classroom where students are encouraged to do so in whatever language is easiest for them. We do want to encourage students to stay in the target language of the class, but it's very likely that a student may need to be able to process or talk to an elbow partner in their native language to be prepared to share out in the target language. So we found that moving away from just calling on the raised hands opens up your classroom to all students engaging and feeling prepared and a degree of confidence to engage.
Thank you, Diane. Olivia?
I was just going to add, I completely agree with both of what they said, and then what some people are saying in the chat, that the cold call thing is like, you need to make sure that they're prepared to interact with that, and that they're not put in a position that they have not really had the thinking time, etc. And then I also think that this idea about wrong answers creating opportunities for critical thinking, it's important to think about wrong answers in terms of the answers they're giving to a math problem, and then also the language that they're using to do that, right? And so even if you're in Spanish only time, if this student who you know doesn't speak a lot of Spanish is really making an effort to share their answer, and they're not sharing it in perfect or only Spanish, they're mixing in some English, which is totally normal in bilingual spaces, that should be very welcomed and that should be accepted positively and not used as an opportunity just to correct their language, but to validate that the information that they're sharing is really helpful, and also ask for support from other students to help figure out other ways to say it.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lot of conversation occurring in the chat that Olivia was alluding to. Thank you for coming, and thank you to our panelists for their amazing talk.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.